Is George Russell going to be replaced by Max Verstappen? And more importantly, is that an upgrade? Spoiler, I don't think it is. In fact, I think the downside of hiring Max outweighs the upside, but more on that later. Is Colapinto back? Will Hamilton retire? And why has Alonso been having coffee in the Alpine garage? And more importantly than that, we answer the biggest question from subscribers: what the fuck is going on with this channel? This and more on this episode of Your Biggest F1 Questions. I'm Jason Hassett, this is Current and Combustion, and welcome to YBF1Q. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. Let's get into it. Hello everybody and welcome to Your Biggest F1 Questions. I'm Jason Hassett, this is Current and Combustion, and you know the deal at this stage, so let's jump straight in. I've made these smaller in terms of page size. Well, we kick off straight at the events, I guess, of Canada. Bob, should McLaren make Norris number 2? I mean, they don't need to. He's already number 2, I guess, in many ways. And he definitely probably had a number 2 when he hit that wall. Look, I don't think McLaren should make him number 2. I don't think they should do that for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into now in a second. But can I just first touch on that incident? I don't know if you guys watched the Blatantly Biased Racing podcast, because myself and Sharon talked about it, and I just called it a really stupid incident. I don't know whether he thought Oscar was moving, or whether perhaps he didn't realize there was the kink in the turn, like it didn't anticipate that. I don't know what was going through his head, but it seems like, unfortunately for Norris, he has the pace. I mean, he was catching Oscar. Oscar was obviously dealing with dirty air from Antonelli, but in reality, like Lando was dealing with a lot more dirty air directly from Oscar. So that excuse is kind of out the window. So I mean, Lando was very, very, very quick. And Lando is very, very quick, and he has been very, very quick throughout his junior career. But it seems like, you know, the thing from last year, I gave him a lot of kind of rope to hang himself with, if you want, which was, you know, he came under pressure and bottled quite a lot last year, especially the starts. And my thing that I said to that was, look, you know, if we're talking about Leclerc, Max, you know, even George to an extent in a couple of the situations where he's lost control of the car, you got to keep in mind that like drivers like Max and Leclerc, they've had race-winning capable cars for a long time. Like Max has had a race-winning capable car on a variety of events, not championship winning, but race winning since 2016. And, you know, you can say that's just down to Max, but Ricciardo was winning races as well. So the car was capable of winning. Max can't change physics. We're not having this argument again. He's brilliant. We're just not having this argument again. The point is, Lando never had that. And some people will say Sochi, but that was the one situation. And it was essentially McLaren not being ready for the fight, and Lando, to be fair, not being ready for the fight, that they got thrown into that situation. But the point is, last year I gave him credit because essentially he came under pressure, but it was stepping up for the very first time from being, you know, a midfield driver, in reality, being a driver for midfield teams, for a midfield team, into one that essentially straight away was thrust into what the media at least called a title fight. I was hoping it would get there. It did seem like it could get there for a while, but between McLaren's mistakes and Norris's mistakes, you know, Norris made a lot of mistakes. He threw away at least 60 odd points. McLaren threw away probably 100, you know, over the course of that season. Even with, if we just look at the situations where the start was bad for both drivers, clearly a clutch gearbox issue. The whole point of this is, last year I said, I think he needs to be given a little bit of time. He's been thrust into a situation that the drivers around him, primarily Max, have acclimatized to. On top of that, McLaren was making a lot of mistakes. So let's see how it goes this year. This year, Oscar has been, apart from one simple mistake in Australia, pretty much pitch perfect. And it seems like Norris consistently just crumbles under pressure in these situations. What makes it strange to me is that he didn't crumble in Monaco on qualifying, which, like, you would think would be the highest pressure situation for him. But I don't know what's going through his head, but the simple fact is I just don't think there's a chance of him winning this championship now. I think he has the pace. But I don't think he has the mental strength, because I think like what'll happen, we'll see this, and I guarantee we'll see this. He'll kind of in his head now go, championship's off, like Oscar's going to win this, and he'll basically deform that. But that will just make him race like he did in the last 3 races of last year for a while. And then it'll build back up to the point of, oh, he's just overtaken or he's caught up to Oscar in the championship. And then it'll crumble again. Whereas Oscar seems absolutely level. What I'm looking forward to personally is I hope there's a situation where Red Bull can turn things around, because I want to see Oscar and Max fight more, because like Max for me is the best driver since Schumacher. I will answer the question in a minute, I promise. I'm just on a bit of a rant here. But Max for me is the best driver since Schumacher. And why he's so good is he is essentially there every single weekend. I know a lot of Max fans talk about how he overdrives the car. You can't fucking overdrive the car. You can only extract the limit from the car. Very hard car to drive. He deserves a lot of praise for that, but he can only drive the car as fast as the car will fucking go. I'm sorry, but that's the fact. But why I think he's so impressive and what I think he should be given credit for is no other driver on the grid delivers as consistently as he does. That's what he does. F1's all about fine margins. You might think, oh, well, that's not enough praise for him. That's the biggest praise you can give an F1 driver. An F1 driver who delivers week in, week out without fail is, just impressive. I think Leclerc is second most impressive because he does it most weeks while driving for Ferrari, which is like driving for the local mental institution. And that's where I think George is just as fast as Max, but he's not there as consistently. So I think that's and he's Mr. Consistency. So like that's high praise. So I think Oscar and Max, the point of that little rant was just to say, the reason I think Oscar and Max would be interesting is those weekends like Spain, like Hungary last year, where Max gets into red mist territory. Oscar's just, I don't see Oscar getting there. And those would be the weekends where it'd be interesting to see the two fight, because I think you'll have calmness from one side and aggression from the other. And it'll be interesting to see how the two of them ping off each other. As for McLaren making Norris number 2, I think that's the worst decision they can do. He's already kind of underperforming himself, so I don't think they need to, first of all. And I think that if you were to start imposing that already, then you'll throw Lando completely, which could upset their chances in the Constructors' title. I think as long as they're miles ahead in the Constructors' title, there's no need for a number 1 and number 2. I think as long as they aren't crashing like this could have gone differently. But if they don't crash like this, it's fine. So yeah, for the moment, I don't think they need to, Bob, to be honest. I think things are sorting themselves out. I think they should do it only if and when they get to a situation where Oscar is leading the championship by, a fine margin. So let's say it's like 50, 60 points and we've only got like 8 races to go, 7 races to go, something like that, right? And even then, I would say don't, unless it's a case of like Red Bull, Mercedes, or Ferrari have essentially clawed back to where the Constructors' title's on the line. Then, it makes sense to go, look, guys, we're all in on the Constructors here, so the best chance of winning is this one. I think, though, they won't do that still. It doesn't seem to be McLaren's way, which, honestly, I mean, I kind of like now that the two of them are hand in hand. Like, it makes sense when one driver is just, willing to win, or is just guaranteed to be better than the other in terms of chances. Like last year, Lando was so far ahead of Oscar, it didn't make sense to prioritize Oscar. The problem now that they face is that they still did. So I think even if Oscar is into a tight title fight, let's say Max and Red Bull pull things back, it's going to be hard for them to say, like, let's back Oscar here. I guess they did at certain points. But yeah, that was a long rant. But yeah, I don't think they should yet. And I don't think they should unless they get into a situations where it's definitely a title fight for Oscar and Lando's not in it, or where the Constructors is under threat. I think those are the only two situations, Bob, personally. I hope that answers the question. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. This is just a quick interruption, not to ask you to be a Colapinto or Flavio fan, but to ask you to check out our new series, Storytime, where we delve in to, well, I say we, it's me basically, isn't it? But where I dive in to, it's me. These people are useless. I've gone so Hollywood. Where I delve in to some of the biggest stories in automotive history. Obviously, it's not for just F1 fans. It is for the petrol heads among you. And it's going to be out every Wednesday going forward. And we've already covered Mercedes, Citroen's coming up, Ford is coming up, Honda's coming up, Porsche's coming up. And then we're going to dive into stories more deep, more niche, like the GM EV1, like the Porsche 911. And I would love if some of you go check that out to give me feedback as it grows. So watch story time. I'll put a link in the description below. And now back to your biggest F1 questions. Here's an interesting one from Jeff. Is Toto still hunting Max? Well, it would seem so, Jeff. It would seem so because his talk after, like Toto pointed out that Red Bull pushed the protest, Max didn't seem to care. There's certain things he's been saying about Max, and so on. We need to keep in mind, though, there is a bit of gamesmanship here. So let's split this into two categories. Is he hunting Max? And is he hunting Max, and is that a good idea? And should he actually swap Max for George or Antonelli? Is that a good idea? So I think these are two very separate questions. Should he and is he hunting Max? First of all, is he hunting Max? Yes, it seems pretty obvious that he still wants to hunt Max at least until Silverstone. So we know that in Austria, at the end of Austria, if Max is either third or fifth, we're not sure. So basically, as you may be aware, my co-host on the Blatantly Biased Racing podcast is an actual sports journalist. I'm just a guy that has friends who works in F1 teams. But between the two of us, I've heard third, he's heard fifth. So probably best to go with him, but I'm hearing third from a couple of engineers that I talked to. So either way, basically, it looks like there is a chance, if it is third at least, probably less likely if it's fifth, unless George catches him, that there will be a performance clause activated at the end of Austria, after the Austrian Grand Prix, in which case Max essentially has a free, get out of contract free clause to leave and go wherever he wants for 2026. I think that's the thing that Toto's holding out for. And I think it's probably a good idea to do it for now, at least, for a variety of reasons. And we'll talk about whether he should go for Max in a sec, like actually should pull the trigger on it. But in terms of actually just hunting him, one, I think he should. It keeps George on his toes for the moment. And it also puts Red Bull under more pressure. So you're putting a direct competitor that is unlikely to be, but may well be a direct competitor for next year, under more and more mounting pressure, where they're having to hold on to Max. Max knows he has options. They're basically pushing more and more media pressure, board pressure, everything on Red Bull. So I think from a strategy point of view, it's good. And, it's just a good way to keep everything on its toes. Probably not great on George, given I think he's been performing brilliantly, which leads me to, so to answer the question, is he still hunting Max? For now, yes. And I think we'll have an answer by the British Grand Prix of whether he's going to continue down that route or not. I think by the British Grand Prix, he's going to have to either have signed Max or sign George or risk losing George and not getting Max at the same time. Now, the question is, should he pull that trigger? If Max becomes available, should Toto actually sign George? I think up until this season, I probably would have said yes. And before anyone says it, not because I think he should have replaced Hamilton. Although, I mean, if you're going to replace one of your two drivers and it's Hamilton or George for the last 3 seasons, and you've got Max coming in, it's Hamilton you replace because George was performing better. That is still the case this year with Antonelli, but this is where things get tricky. And I think I'm one of the few people that think that he shouldn't replace George with Max. And I would love to know your opinions in the comments, but here's my thinking on it. I think the upside of signing Max doesn't outweigh the downsides, essentially, right? And let me explain that. So let's talk about the upsides. The upsides are simple. The upsides, first and foremost, and I know you're going to complain about me saying this is first as well. First and foremost, it's like a game of chess and you're taking one of the opponent's biggest chess pieces off the board, right? So you're removing a huge chess piece for Christian Horner, and you are probably, I mean, in reality, collapsing the entirety of Red Bull. Like, you're taking them off the board, right? Because if Max goes, it's likely that will be the trigger that will cause the board at Red Bull to say no more to Horner. And if Horner goes, Toto well knows, as well as the rest of us sensible people know, that is Red Bull done. Because Red Bull will then be run by a board. Boards can't run F1 teams. Ask Ferrari, ask Toyota, ask a variety of teams. That will be them done. Finished. Gone. Kaput. And that's the biggest upside, right? The problem with that upside, though, is in reality, it's not much of an upside right now. Like, it would be in 2021. It would be a huge upside in 2021. It would be, in 2020, for example. The reason I don't think it is now is because in reality, I think that, it's very unlikely that Red Bull, starting out its new powertrains division, like Audi, has the strongest engine for next year, first of all. They're also a team that doesn't have Newey anymore. And I know, it's not like as much as highly, and I really do, as highly as I rate Newey, Vache and Balbo are still incredibly talented designers, right? I know a lot of Verstappen fans aren't happy with that statement at the moment either, because Verstappen fans are the new Hamilton fans. Yep, I said it. But I think, it's just, I feel like that team at the end of this season will start to unravel anyway in 2026. And I feel like the board has kind of somewhat decided that it's not if, it's when they get rid of Horner. And the moment Horner goes, that's it. So my point there is, if everything was as strong as it used to be, like if it was Horner helmet, Dietrich was still around and Newey was still there, and you had everything kind of working as it used to, then even if they were down on power next year, that team's going to fucking come back. I'm not sure they will this time. And that's why I don't think that upside is what it is. The other side to that upside, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going in deep here. I'm hoping you're enjoying that and not complaining about it. The other side of that upside that Toto can think about is, yes, he's taking it off Horner, but he's also likely taking it out of the hands of another competitor as well, like an Aston Martin. I don't know where else Max would go, actually. I'm guessing Aston Martin or Mercedes. McLaren's not going to hire him. So yeah, I guess you're taking it off Aston Martin and Red Bull, basically. So I think the upside is getting him from Aston, in reality. And I just don't see that as a big enough upside, personally. Maybe it is. Maybe I'll be proven wrong here. But I think if Mercedes are competing with Aston next year, I think it's because Aston are dominant. And I think it's not going to matter whether it's Alonso or Max there. They're going to be killing you, I was probably unlikely. I think it's going to be 27, really, unfortunately. But we'll maybe talk about that in another question. Now, the other thing is, the reason I don't think it's a good idea, and this is contrarian to a lot of other people, is you have to replace one of your drivers, right? And we know it's not going to be Antonelli now, because Antonelli has already signed a contract, as far as I'm aware. That will be announced later at the Italian Grand Prix, but it's already been signed, getting him at least until the end of 2027. And Toto's already backed him. And I think it's a good idea, because I think even though George has been massively outperforming Antonelli so far, the upside of Antonelli is huge. It's a massive, massive run for Antonelli. So you can't replace Antonelli. And then you can replace George. But there's some big downsides to replacing George. The first thing is the actual difference in performance between the two. Going to annoy Verstappen fans again here. Isn't that much. George is incredibly good. He's an incredibly fast racing driver, incredibly fast qualifier, incredibly good wheel-to-wheel driver. And while I would agree he's not as good as Verstappen, the difference isn't huge. It's not massive. And if you give George a title-winning car, he's going to win a title. If it's him against Verstappen, Verstappen probably wins, right? But I think it's fine margins. I think it goes down until the last race or the last two races. Whether or not you believe that, that's fine, but that's my conviction on that. And George is only getting more consistent. You know, he's getting more and more and more consistent every day. So, you know, unless you know you're going to have similarly paced cars and Max is in the other one, and I mean really similarly paced cars and Max is in the other one, and you don't have the advantage, then getting Max isn't a huge upside. In Formula One, it's 90% about the car anyway. And at the end of the day, if Mercedes are confident they're going to have a McLaren-esque advantage next year, then George is beating, like if George is in the McLaren right now, and even if Red Bull are as good as they are right now, George is beating Max. Like if Oscar is beating Max, George is beating Max. Oscar's great, George is just as good. So I think that's the case. And then you come into the downside of that swap, which is you bring Max in, and as much as I really do rate Max, there's a certain person he brings with him that's going to cause you mountains of issues. So the first one is Jos, first of all, right? So you're bringing Jos over, who is a fucking nightmare, who's going to be doing worse than what Hamilton did in terms of spreading shit in the press if things go wrong. Things go great. Like, he'll be quiet. But the moment there's anything wrong, he's going to be all over it. And, you know, like, Toto might think he's close to him now, but, you know, like, look at Jos with Red Bull. Everything Red Bull pushed into getting Verstappen that title, and even quicker than Hamilton turned on Mercedes, you know, Jos Verstappen turned on Red Bull. So that's a problem. Also, Jos has been very much adamant at Red Bull, again, as much as Verstappen fans don't want to hear this shit, that everything needs to be put behind Verstappen at all times. He has to get preference everywhere. If you bring that in, Antonelli's gone within 2 years. He's going to get very good. He's going to get into a situation where he could be fighting for a title, but it's not an on-merit competition. The whole garage, all the best mechanics, best strategies, best everything goes to Max. So even if Antonelli is just as fast, just as consistent, it's a big bar. I get that. But even if that happens, he's on the back foot. So basically my whole point of this is, and I know this pisses people off, I know it will, but the whole point of this rant is to bring Max in, Toto has to throw away a huge amount, for a tiny amount of upside. Like, he basically has to throw away the entire Antonelli development curve, or at least the upside of Antonelli. And he has to throw away George, who could deliver a championship anyway, for a tiny amount. And at the end of the day, that's the way it is. And anyone who doesn't think that, like, I mean, if you really think that, you know, Max makes the car faster every weekend, like, compared to George, like, if you honestly think that, I will give you on some weekends, but if you honestly think on every single weekend Max is 2 or 3 tenths faster than George, I don't know if you're watching the same sport as me. So I just don't think it's a good upgrade. I think it's more trouble than it's worth right now. But he'll probably sign him. Antonio, I'm assuming from Argentina, is asking, is Colapinto back? Well, gracias por that. Yeah, and Colapinto had a great race. As you guys know, I'm a Colapinto fan. He had an absolutely spectacular race weekend in Canada. We finally got to see the Colapinto that we expected. I'm not sure what happened behind the scenes, but we finally got to see it. He outqualified Gasly by a large amount. I think Gasly must have had an issue because that was very low down for Gasly, but the car was kind of shit anyway, let's be honest here. And you could see that throughout race pace and whatnot. But not only did he qualify, it seems like the confidence was there as well, because that move on Albon was brilliant. Like, if that was any other rookie, I genuinely believe they would have backed out and given Albon some space. Colapinto's just not willing to. He's an aggressive driver, and he wasn't like overly aggressive. It wasn't like, we're going to crash here. He perfectly placed that car and put an experienced driver like Albon across the grass. A more experienced driver, Hülkenberg, managed to take advantage of both of them. But that doesn't say anything about Colapinto's move. That just shows how goddamn good Hülkenberg is. But yeah, Colapinto was brilliant. unfortunately finished 13th, but you know, that I think they just hung it out too long on the strategy. It didn't work out. But yeah, just a brilliant drive by Colapinto. I really hope this is him back. And to be fair, right, if we think about this in terms of logically the amount that they do, you need to think like, yes, he was really good last year. He was really quick last year. But the Williams also allowed him to show off a lot more than the Alpine did. So even this year, when his results have been bad, if you look where he is, like in the races at least, compared to where Gasly is, they haven't been like, he's been far off, but in terms of positions, they haven't been far off. The Alpine's just not been great at all. So on top of that, like, he gets thrown in at Imola, which is essentially a testing session. You know, if you look at where Doohan performed in the first race at Australia compared to Gasly, and you keep in mind that Doohan had Abu Dhabi, had testing, and then had Australia, I mean, can you expect, you know, much more or less? Silly mistake, sure, but fair enough, you know, like, can you expect more? Then we go to Monaco. Even Flavio was like, look, it's Monaco. And Spain just didn't go well for him, but that was down to just one issue in qualifying. So, you know, he was qualifying quite well up until that. Like, he was running quite well in Spain. So I think he's finally got the rhythm of the car. I want to see this carry over for some more races, but yeah, I think the Colapinto we know, love, and expect, I think, is back, and I'm hoping we see that in the next few races. Hey there, just a quick interruption to say that if you enjoy these Your Biggest F1 Questions episodes, but you sometimes don't want to watch an entire 45-minute episode, you just want to see some of your favorite questions throughout the week, then we've got you covered. You see, we've just launched Current and Combustion Clips, which is in the link in the description below. You can go subscribe to, and you will just see the biggest questions from the week, as opposed to a one big episode with all of the questions. Now, some of you may be wondering why I split that into two channels and why I didn't just drop those clips, those questions like I did before on this channel. Well, the reason for that is YouTube gets a little bit confused. Story time is for a like automotive, and it knows that someone content, and it can figure out a 5 or 10 minute video aren't interested in 15. That's a long-winded interruption just to say that if you just want to watch individual questions that you're interested in, you can get all of that served to you directly on a plate on Current and Combustion Clips. The link's in the description below. Now back to the video. Let's see what else we got here. Next question. Tom, will Alonso really be replaced? So no. This is an interesting one actually to talk about, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes here that I think is really interesting. So this all spurns from the fact that I think Crofty said that Alonso's been having a lot of coffees at Alpine. I don't think that means anything in terms of next year. Like, he's got a contract for next year. Or at least he's got a +1 an option for next year. And from everything I've heard, that option is already kind of taken up. He wants to be in the Newey car for next year. Newey wants to work with him. You know, so Newey comes in and he gets replaced. Newey's not going to be happy. I think Newey wants to deliver him a decent car next year and work alongside him for a season. Also, one, he's having coffees at Alpine. I mean, it's Alpine. Like, they have better coffee. Two is, we need to keep in mind as well that at the end of the day, Alonso is the manager of a couple of different drivers, including Bortoleto, who's at Sauber. Flavio is looking for different drivers. Perhaps Flavio's wondering about the options for Bortoleto over the next couple of seasons. That could be done. He's also friends with Flavio. So, you know, he could just be chilling out there talking to Flavio. He won 2 championships with Flavio in the past. Flavio brought him in from Minardi, all of these different things. So, like, I mean, it's not crazy to think that he just wanted to hang out with Flavio and, you know, talk shop. The other thing is, at the end of the day as well, he may be just thinking long term about his career. Like, everyone immediately wrote off Alonso this year. I got asked repeatedly why I was bashing Hamilton for his performance and not Alonso. And it's frankly because this is the first time we've not seen Alonso be competitive for, like, you know, more than 5 or 6 races. Like, it's crazy. Like, he's always been competitive. So yeah, there is a variety of things he could be talking to. He could be talking to Flavio about, including other drivers. He also may be just saying to himself that, he's performing well right now. He feels like he's still performing at his peak to an extent. So maybe, just maybe, what he's thinking to himself is, what happens if I do want to stay around after 2026 and there's no space for me at Aston? Alpine is bringing in the Mercedes engine for next year, and perhaps he's just looking at Mercedes engines for next year and seeing that, well, actually, that's going to be a lot better than the Honda. So why don't I just see what the options are here? I don't think he's going to move. I don't think he's really thinking about leaving Aston. And I'm going to move this on from Alonso. I know the question was about Alonso, but I hope that's okay. I cannot find the question here somewhere. Toto, blah blah blah. Tom, thank you for the question. One of the other things, though, we need to talk about is that it does seem like Lance Stroll. And I know if this does happen, there'll be a full just party on this channel. But Lance Stroll may be leaving Aston at the end of the year. It seems like he's fed up. It seems like he's had enough. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. There may be some stuff going on with Lawrence as well, which I don't want to get into here. But there's a lot going on. And it does seem like Lance is potentially thinking about just switching over to the WEC competition, which would make sense. I mean, they're going to be highly competitive probably next year. So maybe he goes over there. And that is where they are thinking that perhaps if Max does go to Mercedes, if all of my decision-making power is overturned, then it could be a situation where George goes to Aston and replaces Stroll. And next year you've got Aston with Stroll and with George and Alonso, which would be an incredible lineup. Or it could be Max and Alonso, more unlikely, but it could be. So yeah, it doesn't seem like Alonso's going anywhere, and I really hope he isn't, because I really would love to see him get that 33rd win. Let's see, we've got one more question, I think, and then we're into the quickfire ones. Sarah asked, will Leclerc leave Ferrari? This is looking more and more likely as the days go by. So here's the thing I think on this is he is not going to leave Ferrari this year. That much is true. He is willing to completely hang it out until next season, because obviously there is a slim chance that the Ferrari engine could be the best engine next year. It's very unlikely, but it could be. The reason I say it's very unlikely is unless they cheat, it's very unlikely, because the Italian media, when it's like, oh, we found an extra horsepower, like, yeah, we've created the greatest engine in the history of humanity, and there's been no word like that. In fact, the media has been quite like, yeah, they're not looking happy about it. So I think he's going to stick around for next year, and I think that's a good choice, like, because anywhere you go next year could be a gamble. And realistically, like, Toto's not looking at a Leclerc because Leclerc doesn't have world championships. And as much as I think Leclerc is an upgrade on George to an extent, the same thing goes as what I said about Max. I think it's Max, Leclerc, George, and then probably Alonso or Piastri. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I think, the difference between Max and Leclerc is really minimal, and it's slightly more minimal between Leclerc and George. So I think there's no point upgrading there. So yeah, realistically, I think he wants to stick it out for next season. And next season, if they don't deliver him a car straight out the gate, basically, if he's not winning a championship next year, then at least he can view the competitive order and leave. He is 27 now as well. So, he's still young, but in F1 terms, he's getting into that kind of older bracket. He's becoming kind of the last generation now, I know that'll happen very quickly. So yeah, I think he is thinking about it. I think that's probably what's triggered a lot of the conversations at Ferrari right now. Unfortunately, once again, Ferrari is doing what it always does, which is, instead of actually fixing some of the upper echelon problems, getting the board to step away, giving more, autonomy to the team. Instead, what they're doing is talking about replacing the team principal. And as Leclerc and Hamilton have both stated, they don't want that to happen. And to be honest, I think if Vasseur goes, unless they bring like Horner in, I think that could be the actual nail in the coffin for Leclerc. That is the only thing I think that could cause Leclerc to end this season and go. I just think there's not enough seat availability at teams that he would be confident in would be better than Ferrari. So I think he'll give them the benefit of the doubt for next year. But I think, yeah, I think next year, if they haven't got a car out of the gates that's fast, it'll spell the end for Leclerc's time at Ferrari. And I think it's time. I think it's all over. Okay, so let's get into the quickfire question. Okay, quickfire from Jamie. How fucked is Fred? Well, that leads on. Yeah, I guess he seems to be fine for the moment. They're bringing a new suspension for this season in Austria, I believe. They said before Silverstone, which is Austria. I don't know why they didn't just say Austria. But yeah, unless they're bringing it for Silverstone and they mean Thursday at Silverstone. It's just a really weird way to put it. Fred is kind of fucked, but honestly, he shouldn't be. This isn't his fault, and honestly, it's like he's not the technical leader. All he can do is be proactive with the tech guys and the leadership and so on. But at the end of the day, like, this car was developed by Enrico Cardile, who has been replaced now with Loic Serra, I believe, if I'm getting the names right. So there was some decisions made with Cardile in moving this car over. They don't seem to have panned out, and it took Loic Serra a while to turn that around. They're now bringing new suspension to deal with the shorter rear wheelbase, I think it is, the shorter wheelbase between the two. And basically they're having some issues with the car's ride height. So these are all technical issues that need to be hammered out. And to be honest with you, as I've said time and time again, Fred needs to be given 5 or 6 or 7 years to build a technical team and a structure that works. And if they kick him out, then really it's not Fred that's fucked, it's Ferrari that's fucked. Because if they kick him out now, unless, like I said, they get Horner, right? Or someone of that caliber, and there's not really anyone else of that caliber unless you're getting Toto, which you're not going to, they fucked themselves, because they're going to be in a situation where if Fred goes, the leadership's going to get upset. You're going to have clashes again. Some of the engineers will go. Leclerc will probably go. It's a waste of time. So is Fred fucked? Maybe. But honestly, the truth of the matter is, even if he's fucked in terms of he has to go, it's Ferrari that are fucked. Let's be honest here. Tim says, favorite F1 YouTuber. Oh, that's an interesting one. I've got a few, but let me think. Favorite F1 YouTuber. I mean, obviously not myself. Can't say that. I do like my co-host as much as I like to dig at him. But I've got a couple. I really like the Mobile Chicane. I really like Peter Brook. It's hard for me to pick favorites between them because, I watched them because I've hung out with them on podcasts and whatnot. Very nice, very humble people, very lovely people. Of the big YouTubers, probably of the really big YouTubers, there's Josh Revel. Obviously, I'd probably say, honestly, out of all of them, if I had to pick one, this is the thing, they have differences. It's hard to pick just one. I guess if I'm picking out of the big YouTubers, the big ones, it's Josh Revel. He's been on the podcast with us, and he's a lovely guy, and he's frankly hilarious. He's as funny as his internet is slow. He's a brilliant guy. FB1 Will as well, very, very funny. Talked to him a couple of times on Twitter, but, seems like a really nice guy as well. But yeah, then there's the historic YouTubers. Like I said, it's Peter Brook and the Mobile Chicane. Again, both lovely, lovely people. And then there's just a shit ton of small YouTubers that just don't get the recognition. The Mobile Chicane is small enough. I think he's roughly the same subscribers as this. Peter Brook's obviously up to, I think, 50 or whatever. But there's a shit ton of small YouTubers that I love. Like there's Baxty B, there's Nedzo. There's just too many of them now to think about. And then there's the guys that have that I've never talked to, never met, but seem like nice people and have the biggest of YouTube following, like P1 and Tomo, that I think do a brilliant job as well. But yeah, if I had to pick a favorite, probably Josh Revel, just because I like his mixture of content. Like he does kind of a mix between doing some historic stuff, track stuff, and so on. Really well edited videos, and gives the humor like FP1 will. They're very different, but if I had to, gun to my head, pick one, probably Josh. But yeah, just lots and lots of good guys there. Thank you for the question, Tim. I believe it was, or Jamie, sorry. Anton says, the fuck is happening with this channel? That's an interesting one. Yeah, really quick on this. I'll just answer this. So I think I've already explained this, but basically with this channel, I want to do a few things. The choice for me was either stop doing the channel or make it incredibly sporadic. or turn it away from doing the normal F1 stuff that I had been doing and that frankly everyone's doing, which is just reacting to the news and giving opinions, which is what I'm kind of doing here. So I did want to keep some element of it, but essentially I've turned this into long form videos where I can dive into stuff. It's a bit more fun. It means I don't have to record as much. I can just sit down once a week and record. And also I want to dive into bigger stories that I don't know much about. So, with my documentaries, what I've really enjoyed, and with my work with Camp Gagnon that I've really enjoyed, is learning about topics that I don't know about. What I like about these questions is I get to answer things that I haven't really thought about, which is great. And I get to interact with like fans and friends who watch F1, which is brilliant. And story time on this channel, a new one. What I love about that is learning about car brands and cars. At the moment, it's car brands, but there will be cars that we cover on there, that I get to cover. If you haven't checked that out, that's going to be a growing thing that I do, where it's like an hour every week of diving deep into the story of a company. I think this week is Ford, for example. And soon I'm going to be launching another one, which I think is kind of a mixture of story time with F1 stuff, but not exactly F1, which is car heroes. And I think F1 fans like yourselves will enjoy that as well, because it's going to be, again, the same thing, but deep diving into the people behind the cars, but more importantly, the racing drivers we all know and love. So the first one's going to be about my favorite driver of all time, Sebastian Vettel. But yeah, diving deep into the stories, their careers, interesting facts in a kind of casual, like this podcasty vibe, which doesn't take a severe amount of editing. So yeah, I just wanted to move to bigger things in terms of like longer videos and more long-term videos instead of just reacting to the news. There's enough channels out there that react to the news. And I had to ask myself the question, like, can I do a better job of that than, say the race or Love Yes or Tomo or P1? No, frankly, I just can't. I don't have the time. This channel for me has always been a passion. It's always been about I enjoy Formula One. And before this channel, I did start something called The Car Nerd, which was about automotive. And it didn't take off. I jumped into F1 instead and found that more fun. But what I really should have always done was just kind of merge the two. And the advantage I have is that I don't really care if this gets views or not. And I'm thinking about this in terms of long term. And I just thought to myself, well, if I'm going to win long term, then I need to come up with something that I can repeat over and over and over again and not find it boring. And I've come across 3 formats that I think work for me. So there's story time, where I can dive into cars and car brands and really dive into those. And then there's car heroes, where I can talk about the people behind the cars, really dive in. And then my F1 thing is done by this, just answering questions and chilling out. And I've also got my F1 podcast anyway. So there's a lot of people who will unsubscribe or not like this content, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Like I said, I think this will be successful over the long term. In the short term, it's going to get less views. And that's just that. That's just the way things are. Mark says, any updates on Horner? I think for the time being, for the rest of this season, he's safe. I think it'll be start of next season we get problems. The reason I think he's safe is he mentioned that Helmut Marko was of minimal input these days, which is something he said before Newey. And I think the board now is kind of coming to the same realization I did, which is Helmut Marko hasn't done anything useful in a decade, and Horner is the only thing keeping that team from becoming a crumbling pile of shit. Because if Horner goes, Verstappen goes. So any Verstappen fans that think it's Verstappen can only perform because the car performs. I don't care whether you think that's incorrect or not. It's just the truth. Like if Verstappen was in a Haas, he wouldn't be winning races. Simple as that, So, as good as Verstappen is, as brilliant as he is, best driver since Schumacher, he needs the car to succeed. And in order to have the car to succeed, Horner has to run that whole team. He keeps it together. So I think they've realized that for now. And I think they're going to try and keep things together for now. I think it won't change until next season. So there's no real update. But from what I'm hearing, it's like a stay of execution for now. We'll see. And we finish it all off, I think, with Trev saying, has Hamilton retired yet? No, and he won't until 2026. He's going to stick around until the end of 2026 to see what happens. But it hasn't been an upgrade for Ferrari. And honestly, the biggest concern for me is the fact that, all of the excuses and reasons why he was slow against Russell are the exact same excuses and reasons why he's slow against Leclerc. Apart from the groundhog, that is new. But yeah, he's not going to retire till the end of 2026 because why would he? But yeah, I just don't see him. Don't see him going anywhere until the end of 2026. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe. As always, please do leave questions in the comments of the video or on after this video. I'll leave a link to put questions for next week or whatever. I'll put it in the description, maybe put a post or whatever. But please leave comments for questions you have and I'll try and answer them in next week's video. If you stuck around till this part in the video, it means you've probably enjoyed it, I would assume. And if you did, that means you'll probably also enjoy my F1 podcast, the blatantly biased racing podcast, where I'm joined by my co-host, the casual F1 fan, every week, as well as a range of other guests. And it's basically a weekly podcast where we just rant about everything that's going on. Sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, especially if we get a good chatty guest. So be sure to subscribe to that if you haven't already. And hopefully I'll see you there. Thank you again for watching. Bye.